Presight featuring in headlines throughout the week. Why they've been prevalent down at GITEX throughout the week. Now, one of the stories that's emanated is the fact that nearly half of UAE finance teams are already using, dare I say it, AI. And another 60% or so are piloting projects at the moment. It's no longer a buzzword. It's becoming business critical at present. So what does that actually look like when it comes to your office setting? The Business Breakfast's Georgia Tolley caught up with Andrew Reakes. He's the Director of Financial Services at Presight, which itself is part of the G42 group. He gave us a few insights, or he gave his insights to Georgia on why AI adoption is so fast here in the UAE.
So I think it happens at a national level, and then I think it's then coming down to an enterprise as well. I think if you look at what's happening at the governmental level, there's a huge drive for the adoption of AI, and this is then coming into the enterprises as well. I think what the organisations have really started to discover is how do they do things differently and how do they leverage AI to support that. So historically, it's been embedded, it's been in the compliance teams, it's been in the back office. I think more and more what we're starting to see is these organisations are saying, how does this allow us to be different than our competitors and really attract a new clientele?
Okay, so where are banks seeing the biggest wins here in the UAE? Yeah. And really importantly, what does that mean for you and me as consumers?
So I think, like we just mentioned, for the last few years, the answer's been AI, and everyone's been running around trying to go, what's the question? What are we trying to solve? It was historically a CTO-led discussion. I think more and more what we're seeing is this is a business discussion. It's not purely focused on CTO. It's the line of business team engaging directly with the CTO to really look at what they're solving. Historically, where we've seen it is, how does it help procurement? How does it help finance? How does it help legal? But more and more it's transitioning to front office. So we're looking at how do organizations, how do they attract customers? How do they work out where they put their real estate? How do they embed hyper-personalization into their mobile app so you and I can get loans or we can get finance instantaneously?
Okay, well that sounds like good news from the point of view of consumers to have that hyper-personalization. This is an industry that is moving so fast, that is changing so quickly. Even though we spoke to you just a couple of weeks ago on the Business Breakfast during AI Week, what has actually changed for you guys since then? Have you had any new announcements, for example?
I think it's less new change, and more an evolution. It's continued to accelerate. Customer interest and organisation interest has continued to accelerate. Even over the course of this week, we've had tons of customers and organisations on the stand, really interested in what Presight and what G42 as a family of organisations is doing. We've had conversations. We were at the MasterCard Edge event on Wednesday. We were down with JP Morgan presenting at their FinTech and their Finance Summit. So really it's been less of a new announcements, but more of an evolution of the journey that we're on.
Okay, UAE organisations already dedicate about 10% of their budgets to AI. Now that is close to the global average, which is around 13%, there or thereabouts. How are you helping UAE-based clients get real value from those AI investments? Because they are spending big.
They're spending big. For me, and the way that Presight are helping them is really helping organisations become laser focused on what they're trying to achieve. We touched upon it earlier. The answer's been AI, and what's the question? Actually, how do we start small and how do we grow it? But how do we start off with an initial focus that's laser focused on what the business outcome is we're trying to achieve?
So if there's a company listening to this right now and they're thinking, they're asking the question, which is, how can I improve my bottom line? How can I get through these sort of mundane processes faster? Is that the type of thing that you guys can help with? You're such a big company. Can you help even smaller SME style companies?
100%, and we're working across the spectrum of organisations in the region, big, small, government. It comes back to the same story. It comes back to, how do we become laser focused? What is it that we're trying to achieve as a business? And how do we embed AI into that to help us change the dynamic and change how we're going moving forward?
Do you think that the UAE banks are managing to keep up with the fintechs when it comes to their adoption of AI? I'm talking about your traditional UAE banks, the ones that still issue checkbooks.
I genuinely think they are. I think they're starting from a very different position. But The reason we use these institutions is because we fundamentally have trust in how they operate. And so that's key in the financial services. You're in a regulated sector. I think what they're really looking at doing is how do they embed it into into the processes that they understand and embed it into the customer engagements that they already have. So while they're at a different position than the fintechs like you mentioned, I think the adoption that we're seeing from them is still accelerating. If you look at some of the announcements, if you look at First Abu-Dhabi Bank, the innovation hub that they've launched, this is really focused on really embedding AI into the heart of the business.
Okay, what's next? I'm only going to ask you to look ahead to next year. You can look into your crystal ball for further if you want, but when it comes to fintech and the use of artificial intelligence in financial institutions, where do you see it heading?
Well, I think we talked about 2026. I think we can go further than that, 2030, 2036. I think fundamentally, we're going to see the organisations become more and more service providers to us. Less of product providers, more of service providers. And I think our interactions with these organisations will just be seamless.
Really? And just as simple as that, it's just going to become efficient and, I suppose, from the bank's perspective, cheaper to run.
Absolutely, and embed it into the heart of giving us as customers, precisely what we want, when we want it. This is the conversation that these organisations are having now.
I just wonder whether those efficiencies will mean that fees will come down. I'm just putting that out there into the ether. I'm not going to ask Andrew Reakes' comments on that.
That was Georgia Tolley, the Business Breakfast reporter, in conversation with Andrew Reakes, Director of Financial Services at Presight.